economic conflict between the United States and Iran. The issue here is the fear of Iran's nuclear program continuing and creating an atomic bomb. So what's going on is the US and other major countries are using their economic power to try and stop/slow the continuation of Iran's nuclear program through sanctions. These sanctions continue to plague the Iranian people, as well as we'll see evidence of in the following slides. How the Iranian people handle these issues will be something that the U.S. needs to monitor. It can go both ways, with the Iranian people blaming and hating the West or turning on the Iranian regime. The problem is, do economic sanctions work? What are the lasting effects of economic sanctions, and is it really worth it? This is a brief history of the relationship problems between the United States and Iran so that we can get a better understanding of whether or not sanctions will work, have a possibility of working, those kind of things. In 1953, the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. And 1979, we see the Iranian Revolution. The U.S. backs the Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and the Iranians force him to abdicate and flee. 1979 to 1981, the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis takes place and 52 hostages are taken. 1980, the U.S. rescue mission in Tehran, Iran fails. 1981, U.S. hostages freed after 444 days. The period of 1985 to 1986, Iran-Contra scandal, U.S. gives weapons to Iran so that the U.S. hostages held by Hezbollah would be freed. 1988, Iranian passenger plane shot down by U.S. warship USS Vincennes, killing 290 people. The U.S. claims it was a mistake. 1997 through 2005, Khatami presidency calls for hopeful breakthrough with the U.S.-Iranian relationship. 2002, President Bush calls Iran the axis of evil in his brief State of the Union address. This does not help U.S.-Iranian relations. 2002 to the present, the Iranian nuclear program causes fear among the international community. And 2005 to 2013, Iran elects President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, relations worsen. The year 2013, President Barack Obama calls President Hassan Rouhani, which was the first U.S.-Iran conversation between heads of state for 30 years. This is epic. Just a little insight into what is at stake. Iran has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz in the past because of economic sanctions from the U.S. and the European Union. Iran's economy depends on exporting oil. So, closing the Strait of Hormuz would amount to an economic death sentence. But with the sanctions the United States and the EU and other countries have imposed, this is kind of an economic death anyway. So shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, I'm not sure, would really make a difference, because we are, in essence, not allowing their oil to be sold anywhere. And then countries that do purchase their oil, a lot of times are being punished by the United States or the EU and other countries, trying to make these sanctions work, trying to cripple this economy. The IMF expects Iran's economy will shrink 1.5% this year in inflation-adjusted terms, after an estimated 1.9% contraction last year, which was the biggest since 1988, when Iran's 8-year war with Iraq ended. These are big issues here. This is, the IMF stepping in and saying, things are bad. Their economy is suffering. It is shrinking. Inflation is crazy. These are the results of what the sanctions are doing to this country. Oil is what Iran, their biggest industry, and by imposing these sanctions on their oil, imposing sanctions on how they receive payments, we are really crippling the economy. But the question is that really hurting the government, or is that just destroying the people? Once again, what's at stake with these sanctions? The U.S. and EU sanctions on Iran's oil shipping and banking sectors have halved Iranian crude exports. It helped fuel inflation and unemployment and drive down the value of the rial. The problem is that sanctions are wreaking havoc on the Iranian economy, which relies on oil exports and about 80% of its public revenue. And you got to question, who does this hurt? These issues are hurting the people. of Iran, as one source states, blue-collar workers in downtown Tehran can barely afford meat, while luxury cars are ubiquitous in neighborhoods in North Tehran. And what that means is, there's people out there that are really benefiting, and that's usually the black market people. Those are your scumbags that are just really making money off of the suffering of other people because of what's going on. That black market's opened up wide, and somebody's running around in a BMW and a Mercedes, and the guy down the road can't afford to feed his family. So this is a huge key question about whether or not these sanctions are working, because sure, they're suffering, but is that going to backfire against us? Are they going to turn against the West again, like they did in the late 70s and early 80s? So what could happen? Military conflict. That's the key right here. Military conflict. These people are possibly building an atomic bomb. That's what we're trying to get them to stop doing. But either way, even if they don't build the atomic bomb, we still have the opportunity for more military conflicts. We still have the opportunity for more sunken ships. We still have the opportunity for more planes shot out of the sky. These are the things that these sanctions are going to possibly bring on. The U.S. would step in if Iran blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. We already know that. This is something from the past. Blocking the Strait of Hormuz would cause economic issues with the passage of oil into the Persian Gulf. I mean, there's a big, huge source of water in that area that Iran has the ability to really put a wrench in. For other countries as well, plus our military endeavors in both Afghanistan and Iraq. This is not a good thing. These continued tensions could be the cause of future military engagements, which would only hurt the already troubled section of the world. We already know that the Middle East is in rough shape, so adding to it would not necessarily be a good thing. So what's happening today? News. Trump imposed new sanctions on Iran because of a latest ballistic missile test that was done by the Iranian government. It's a little really quiet. We don't know exactly what happened. We know that they tested some missiles. They won't tell us a lot of information about what's going on, but that's the newest. The new sanction is a ban on banking transfers, which we already see that. Sanctions, we've already seen those banking sanctions, but it's even worse. After the sanctions were announced, the Foreign Ministry of Tehran promised to impose legal sanctions on an unspecified number of American individuals and entities, in effect a retaliatory blacklist. We don't know exactly what that means, because with these sanctions, it's already illegal for Americans to really invest in Iran, invest in business in Iran. There's a lot of red tape. So we don't know what this means, but it's a retaliation, and so this is a step up in aggression and anger. So are these sanctions really working? So the question is, do sanctions work? Sanctions sometimes work in Iran. Sanctions often don't work, as we've learned through the readings in other countries. They often don't work in Iran either. Sanctions in Iran have worked in that they have brought Iran out to negotiate with us. But have they really stopped anything? This new president is willing to come to the table, which is a plus. But are they coming to the table to pretend? Are they coming to the table to negotiate, to back us down? We don't know. The only reason these sanctions may work is because they're not just from the U.S. Other countries as well, such as the EU, are doing it. We're really putting them under lock and key. Where in other countries like Cuba, North Korea, sanctions really don't, not a big deal. Well, I mean, not a super big deal. North Korea really doesn't care. Sanctions are really hurting the economy and thus the people, which can backfire against us depending on what happens in the future. Once again, do we want these people to hate Western civilization? We see terrorism all over. Do we want these people to have a good reason to hate us? Their family are starving. Things like that. This is the stuff that they're going to hear. And they're going to hear propaganda. They're not going to hear why these sanctions are necessarily being put in effect. They're going to hear their spin on it. So is it worth it? We'll find out.